and let's jump straight into the topic on women's representation on boards. Now, you've both researched this extensively, and if we think about the number of women on boards, if we think about the JSE top 40 companies, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in South Africa, we still don't have parity. About 36% of women hold board positions in the top 40 companies. And then when we look then at the executive positions, only 23% hold executive positions. Now, this seems impossible in this day and age. Nadia and Suzette, why do we still see gender disparity on boards?
Good morning, everyone. Anita, if we think about gender parity, that's not per se what we think should be, at least at this stage, the ultimate outcome, a 50% women, 50% male representation. We have seen some gradual progress, and we think that targets in South Africa actually played quite a good role in getting more women on boards due to various reasons, which we will unpack. But of course, there are some scope for improvement and some barriers on which Suzette will also mention.
Hello, everyone. I totally agree. I'm personally also not in favor of parity as such, but rather support targets. And I think many of the reasons why we still have a low representation of women on boards in South Africa is very similar to the international context, where we still see social barriers. We see gender stereotypes, difficulties, struggles that women face in terms of work-life balance. And I also think that the Old Boys Club is still present. So I think that, in my view, definitely represents some of the most important reasons why we don't see more. But there has been progress on the JSE, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't have data available to look at unlisted boards, and especially of the companies that are sizable, and there are quite a few of them. But why would it then be that this representation hasn't grown more organically in South Africa? After all, we have a lot of women that become chartered accountants, lawyers, engineers, all kinds of professions. Very often people that serve on a board comes from a background with a type of a professional background. Sometimes it would be, experience, managerial experience. But it seems as though in South Africa it hasn't really grown very organically. What are your thoughts about that?
Anita, it boils down to networking to a large extent. So we agree with you, it's not per se at this stage anymore about a limited talent pool. It's about from which talent pool do you source. So from which networks do you source? Is it limited to the people that you know and that you play golf with, or do you really try and broaden the scope from which you search?
Yeah, and sorry, Suzette, you want to say something? You add?
No, definitely. We've seen international research where the Old Boys Clubs have been confirmed because simply men and women have different social networks. And the research shows that hard and soft laws actually result in the deinstitutionalization of these Old Boys Club. So I don't think we are there yet. There has been progress as more women serve on boards, especially when we get a critical mass of 3 or more women. We do see change occurring. They introduce their networks. Somebody said it so beautifully that a woman can't run the race on the outside. They need to get into the same social networks as men. But that, of course, is very difficult. I think that is a huge barrier in South Africa. Women are not always perceived as professional equals. And they face a lot of headwinds, especially if you are the only woman on the board. Still facing those stereotypes and issues of tokenism. So we've seen progress, but there are still quite a few barriers.
Yes, and thinking about these networks, when, as you alluded to, if you don't play golf, perhaps, or these days cycle, perhaps you're not part of that group, and it's quite difficult. And I think it's difficult for men also to enter some of these groups, to be seen, to be acknowledged, and even more so then if you don't fit that stereotype and you don't do the same things. I've seen a lot of women take up golf as a result, to kind of try and increase the opportunity to break into that network. I want to quickly stop at that 30%. And just talk about that, and that's the theory of Conrad and a few other researchers brought about, and there's a 30% club now based on that, where the idea is to have 30% representation. Do you think that that would be a good figure as a target for boards to try and aspire to have so many women on a board?
I would definitely. I've seen a great deal of research across different economic contexts where they clearly identify that once you have 3 or more women, 30% then basically, that the benefits of having women on boards really start to manifest. 1 woman is of course better than no woman. 2 already better, but I would definitely say that critical mass, because one of the spin-offs is once you have critical mass, it's called the trickle-down effect, that these women then promote the appointment of other women in senior positions, and these of course then become eligible for board positions in future then. So I would definitely support the 30%.
Yeah, and Anita, if I can add to that, some of the JSE top 40 companies, when they've done that study on the 36%, they also found the so-called one and done. So they would argue we now have appointed a woman, and that, then it might be a woman feeling like she's in isolation, so it might be harder to get her voice conveyed and to really to get heard within the boardroom. So 30% in our view is more realistic than 50% parity, because it's also a tedious process to set these targets, to report on the targets, and then to being held accountable for these. So target setting, if it's a more realistic target with a step-by-step approach, we're definitely in favor of that. And something else that I would add,
yes.
in terms of that, if you think about the pipeline and you think about succession planning with these targets, it's important that women at more mid-range level also get strategic responsibilities and not only operational for their day-to-day activities, because then you can, in a more organic way, grow your own pipeline of women that might then be eligible or would be interested to apply if they see there are more than one woman that's actually featuring and prospering at board level.
Yeah, and it's that example, isn't it? Not just one example, but seeing that the company takes this seriously, actually puts effort into it, and that you are able to help people to grow into these roles so that they don't end up being placed into roles where eventually perhaps they don't succeed. And they fail for various reasons of perhaps not being ready yet and so forth. But I want to come back to a base question that we're, in a sense, assuming that everybody agrees about us having women on boards. What does it mean to have a woman on a board? Why do we need women on boards?
For me, a key thing is diversity of thought. So it's not about women being better than men. That's not the argument. It's about what can different people with different perspectives, and that goes beyond gender. That could include race and background, education, etc. So the way that we think, as soon as we start to have more diverse thoughts within a boardroom, something like groupthink could be eliminated. And also, for instance, perspectives on risk. women are often seen as less risk averse, but that's not per se the case. They might see risks in a different light or think in a different way about it, and that brings a more balanced boardroom discussion on key issues.
I would like to echo that. We don't say that women are better than men, they're just different. For me, a key difference also lies in their leadership style, in that women are more prone to embrace inclusivity, transformation. They are often the drivers of ethics and integrity in businesses. And research shows us that the more women there are, and that's empirical research, hard facts, the more women on a board, the more innovative companies become, the better their sustainability practices become, the more transparent their reporting, financial and non-financial. We've also seen quite an influential study in Europe where the presence of women on boards has been linked to a reduction in environmental, social and governance, ESG controversies. So there are many benefits that women bring through the way that they've got different experiences, different viewpoints, they bring fresh perspectives, different leadership styles, they're more empathetic. So I think those are the benefits of having a diverse board. And here, of course, we talk about gender, but we can take it wider than just gender.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that also to echo to women listening out there. Is the fact that who you are is important, how you act is important, and not to want to change that because you go into a masculine environment, because then we lose that quality to be unique. If you're just going to act like some of the men, which is really not useful to us at all, especially at this very senior strategic level of boardroom governance. Where it's so important to have diversity of opinions. Now, thinking about what's happening globally and also drawing it back to South Africa, will quotas, legislated quotas, help us in this country? And what are your thoughts about that? Because there's lots of perceptions that may develop because of quotas. So just your thoughts on that.
We are not pro-quota. We are more in favor of targets. Many of the international countries that instituted quotas have seen some negative effects associated with specifying that companies need a certain percentage of women by a specific date. Shareholders have seen that quite often in a negative light. And the women who are then appointed in those positions are also very negative. So for us, setting of targets is a better way than quotas to promote board gender diversity. It allows companies a bit more time. It gives the women in those positions also more time to find their feet and to really develop that talent pool. So personally, and I think you share the view with me, is that quotas is not the way to go. We also did a study pre-COVID in which we gauged the views of institutional investors in South Africa, and none of them were in favor of quotas.
And also, if you think about what Kanter said about tokenism, often if it's only one woman being appointed, she might shield away, her voice might not be heard because she doesn't want to stand out in the crowd, or she overcompensates. So she tries and she totally overperforms to not being seen as a token. And even in Norway, some of the women where they, of course, have quotas said, I would like to be appointed on merit. I don't want to be appointed just because I'm a woman. I belong within this group because I worked hard to get here. So there is quite negative perceptions, and literature also shows quite a debate in terms of whether a quota is really the optimal way to go, because it can result, unfortunately, it can result in tokenism.
The advantages, those who advocate for quotas say that it can bring about change very quickly, it can professionalize the nomination processes, but in my view, the negative aspects. Fem power washing is the word that is often used, and tokenism and overboardedness. Those negatives and negative perceptions about companies leading to shareholders withdrawing money, cost of equity then increasing. All these negative consequences for me weigh heavier than the benefits of quotas.
Yeah, and I think that's, when we talk about the societal change, because let's face it, having more women in paid work in very senior roles, and we're talking today about board level roles, means it's major societal change. And we really do need to manage, in a sense, the backlash, the negative perceptions on it, at the same time do the good work that we know is the right work to be doing. And so perhaps this as one of the elements that can be used is not so useful, especially in the South African context. You mentioned a word there, overboarding. And I know the term that gets used together with that in the case of women is this phenomenon of golden skirts, a group of highly qualified women who are repeatedly appointed to board positions and then eventually end up making a career of different independent board roles. There are many men that do that as well, by the way, but there is this phenomenon of golden skirts. What have you found in your research with regards to overboardedness of women?
Anita, when we started off with overboardedness research, we were also a bit negative on it. We thought here we have individuals that take up multiple board positions and they might not be able to find time for everything, because it has the two hypotheses: being busy, too busy to serve, so not attending meetings or not being properly prepared. But it also has the other hypotheses in terms of experience. So you can gain invaluable experience by serving on a number of board positions. And our research showed that people that are classified, and we also use the word multi-boarded, which is not so negative if you think about overboarded, that the experience that they gain is so valuable and that they don't tend to miss more meetings than the directors that only serve on less than 3 boards, because typically overboarded is seen as 3 or more board positions. So it does have some potential negatives in terms of the same woman being appointed to multiple boards rather than expanding the pool, but it should not be seen only in a negative light.
Yes. What we also found and concluded with that article is really that appointing an overboarded director, or golden skirt, should really be done on a case-by-case basis. That it's not this broad generalization saying that all directors who serve on multiple boards, 3 or more, aren't able to perform their duties effectively. So it should really be considered on a case-by-case basis. So we think having women on the board, that's the problem, getting on the board. Once the woman is there, she can then help the nomination committee, for example, to cast the net wider, to make inroads into this old boys club. So we're not all that negative when it comes to appointing directors with experience to multiple boards.
And what I'm hearing you saying is that companies really should take their due diligence processes seriously before just appointing anybody onto a board, and to ask the questions, if the information is somehow not available to them, about how many boards this individual does serve on, so that independent judgment can be made about how important this individual really would be for a particular board, and to make sure also that that they check on the basics, like we've had a lot of issues around people's qualifications and those types of things, and that really needs to be strengthened. I want to also turn to the other side. We're talking about qualified individuals, women that have been exposed, to various roles and therefore can then serve on boards or have served on multiple boards and do that proficiently. But how can we prevent companies from appointing young and inexperienced women just for the sake of appointing a woman? And we see this happening as well. How can we prevent this?
I think, and that's my view, that it's not necessarily a bad thing should that younger woman be appointed maybe to shadow a more experienced woman. I actually think it can be an opportunity for nomination committees to grow the talent pool. Where the danger comes in is if that young, inexperienced director is the only woman on the board. Implications for the company and for the individual in question. So I think rather than preventing companies from appointing younger, inexperienced women directors, it should rather be done in conjunction with more experienced women. And then we move towards that critical mass, that trickle-down effect. So I would rather than prevent it, encourage, but with caution.
And something like sponsorship could, for example, also play a role to identify a promising younger woman and then help her, for instance, to get to IODSA accreditation. So to really be like a director that could serve, or to get the necessary training and development. So I agree with Suzette with starting with a board position at a time. It's definitely sensible to expand also the network by not only having directors with a long tenure and that are of a certain age, but to bring younger women in and to expand the talent pool. And also, if we have more women, then we actually have role models on boards that more women might be encouraged to aspire to, in the end, reach that specific position that they set their eye on.
What I'm hearing here is that one really needs to look at each board individually and look at where it's at for its needs, for the needs of the organization, the size, the age of the organization, how well established governance processes and practices are within that organization, and then to grow the timber even on the board by bringing in younger individuals then to learn from more experienced individuals on that board. I want to go then to the issue of, is it really a moral legitimacy issue, for us to be looking at this and pressing for it? Or should we really move on to, an issue of license to operate? Are these mechanisms or tools in our toolbox that we should be using at all? And when do we use these arguments with regards to increasing the number of women on board?
Oh, my answer is a definite yes. It is imperative. Moral legitimacy is bestowed on an organization when the stakeholders regard the actions of the company as socially acceptable. And of course, the definition of socially acceptable has changed. We are moving towards organizations where transformation, sustainability, innovation are more important. And therefore, I think it's critical that women be appointed. I also think a second argument is that companies and their boards need to reflect the stakeholders and the communities in which they operate, irrespective of the state of the economy. Social license to operate today is closely tied to ESG considerations, managing sustainability, developing the next generation in our country, cybersecurity, all those issues. So the definition of what is socially acceptable has changed, and women are very well equipped, as we mentioned earlier, to deal with collaboration, stakeholder relations, reducing controversies, driving ethics and sustainability. So for me, the question is not what the state of the economy is. It is imperative. It has to be done.
And if you think about an organization to really prosper and to go forward, we have to focus more on sustainable value creation and to make sure that we account not only for profits, of course, but for the interests of the stakeholders that we impact and that it's impacted upon. And research shows that women specifically are very sensitive for environmental and other sustainability matters and really focus on sustainability endeavors and lead in a more empathic manner, and that is critical, especially within our environment. So going forward, we definitely need more balanced boards in terms of how they are compiled, not only gender, but the different types of diversity, and to also ensure that it's more inclusive, that the people that come in on the board, maybe the first woman being appointed, that she feels more welcome. So that whole environment within the team, that's undeniable that we need women, especially in the South African environment, with all the injustices that we see.
I knew this interview would be very insightful, and I really want to thank you both, Professors Suzette Viviers and Nadia Mans-Kemp. Thank you so much for the work that you do, the passion with which you do it, the accuracy with which you do it, because there's lots of research out there, but one never knows what is really, really evidence-based, and your work is definitely evidence-based. Thank you very much for sharing your insights.